Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
I got my bags packed on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh no!
Amateur Traveler, episode 780. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about rugged landscapes, snow-capped mountains, Buddhist monasteries, houseboats, and mosques as we do a road trip through Ladakh and Kashmir in India. Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Let's talk about Ladakh and Kashmir. I'd like to welcome to the show Agnes Simigh from voiceofguides.com, who's come to talk to us about Ladakh and the Kashmir in India. Agnes, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, and people are going to wonder if that's a Kashmiri accent, and it is not. You are not actually from India. So what's your connection with the region we're going to talk about?
Yes, I'm not from India, but I go very often to the country, to other parts as well. I'm working as a tour guide, as an international tour guide, and India is one of my destinations. And I'm also doing Ladakh and Kashmir trips. So that's how I'm connected to the place.
Excellent. And why should someone go to this region of India?
I would differentiate the two places. We will talk about that later. Kashmir and Ladakh, both are in the north of India, but they are totally different. I would say that it's a very untouristic place. Mm-hmm. It was lately discovered. Actually, Ladakh is surrounded by mountains, and till the 1970s, there were no tourism at that place. So it's relatively new and unknown. It's beautiful. If somebody has been to India, then probably remembers it like a crowded place, very hectic, mm-hmm. very noisy. But Ladakh and Kashmir is totally different. Ladakh is scarcely populated. The religion is different. It's a very clean place. So it's like being in another country, completely in another country. It's one of the most beautiful landscapes that I have ever seen in my life. So it's special for several reasons. For the religion, it is Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism.
Hmm.
In contrast to other parts of the country, like India is a Hindu country, but Ladakh, there are a lot of Buddhists.
Okay.
Actually, it's very authentic there. So there are a lot of monasteries in this region, Buddhist monasteries. So for all these reasons, the landscape, the religion, the people, everything is different. It's like being outside India.
Well, and one thing we should get on the table here, probably going up front. So, two different regions, as you mentioned, and Ladakh, we've actually talked on the show before, but I think it's been 15 years. So, it's been quite a long time since we talked about trekking in India. And trekking is a lot of what people do when they go to Ladakh. Kashmir is in the news, not always for good things, because Kashmir includes a region that is disputed between India and Pakistan. So let's talk about safety before we talk about anything else. Ladakh is going to have twisting your ankle kind of safety. Kashmir, are there things that we should be aware of before we go to that region?
Kashmir was a very popular, a top tourist destination in India till 1979. And as you mentioned, there were clashes between the Hindus and also extremist Muslims, and Kashmir became an unsafe place and deterred the tourists for quite a long time. Even up to now, it's mainly Indians who visit this part of India. Lately, Kashmir was not a popular destination, and you are right, there were security issues in the 1990s. Before, it was a top destination in India, and unfortunately, Kashmir got forgotten for the foreigners. Now, Indians are discovering it's popular in the domestic tourism, but I think this bad reputation still exists and keeps the foreign tourists away.
Okay.
I was last time in Kashmir in 2019 and also 1 year before in 2018. Kashmir is at the moment safe. However, I would mention some issues. Of course, you always have to read the news. It's very important in Kashmir because there are also ongoing clashes along the border, mainly along the border. But of course, you never know exactly what happens. It can spill over to the rest of the country as well. And it happens sometimes. When it happens, then they close the schools, then there are no flights, no trains, no buses. It happens time to time. I was in India when it happened, in other parts of India at that time. So it's good to be updated, of course, but I would not say that you can't go there because it's really most of the time safe place. You see a lot of soldiers around, which makes you a little bit maybe afraid or maybe more safe, but you can go there. You check the news, keep yourself updated, and then Kashmir is also a beautiful destination.
Well, great. Well, what kind of itinerary are you going to recommend for us with the two places?
I would combine the two, like mainly focusing on Ladakh because I think there are more special things in Ladakh. So I would advise to arrive in Leh. Leh is the capital of Ladakh region in India, in the very north. Leh is a very small town. There is not so much to do, but it's really also lovely and it's a good starting point. Then from Leh, you should go to visit the monasteries of Ladakh and also go to the Nubra Valley. The Nubra Valley is located on the other side of the Kardungla Pass, which is the highest drivable road in the world. It's like over 5,000 meters. So already the road is amazing. In the Nubra Valley, there is a desert, which is very special. Like at high altitude, you find desert. Even you can ride a camel if you want.
Well, and let's slow down here a little bit. I'm going to jump in and ask some questions. So you mentioned going to Leh. Is there anything particular we're going to do while we're in the city of Leh? Leh is a small town. Okay.
You can imagine it like a one-street city. There is not so much to do. But it has a Leh Palace, for example, that you can visit, and the stupa.
So, and the Leh Palace is a palace from what time period?
It's from the 16th, 17th century.
Okay.
It's partly in ruins. It's mainly interesting because of the view. So Leh doesn't have big highlights. But for example, when you go to the Leh Palace or you go to the stupa, they are both located at a higher altitude with an amazing view of the mountains and of the city. As I mentioned before, Ladakh is mainly about the beautiful landscape.
Okay. And you mentioned the stupa, so that's the Shanti stupa, and so this is a tends to be a solid structure and quite often a relic of the Buddha somewhere buried in this structure, and it's pointy. I don't know how else to describe a stupa. People don't know what one looks like.
Yeah, they say that. But it's a peace pagoda. There is a
Got
series of
it.
peace pagodas all over the world,
Hmm.
many of them in India, and it's part of that. So it's actually quite new from the 20th century.
Got it. Okay. So we're going to do those two while we're in Leh, and then you mentioned we're going to get out to the monasteries. Which monasteries are you going to guide us to?
It's quite difficult to choose because there are hundreds of monasteries in Ladakh. And then
Mm-hmm.
comes the question, which one to visit? There are more famous ones, of course, but there are less famous which are still very attractive, charming because they are remote. I would suggest visiting some famous ones because there is a reason why they are well known.
Okay.
For example, Hemis Monastery, it's not far from Leh. You can visit it on a day trip. Hemis Monastery is famous for its festival. Every June or July, it depends on the year. Next year it will be in July. There is a festival, and many tourists come for that festival. It will be on the 8th and 9th of July next year. What is special about this festival is that the monks of the monastery, they dance in masks. It's part of the Ladakhi culture. Only monks can dance and wear these masks. Otherwise, they just hang it inside the monastery and nobody can touch that. So these cham or mask dances are a particular thing in Ladakhi culture.
Hmm.
Another monastery I would recommend is the Tiksey monastery. It's also around Leh. It is probably the most photographed monastery. It's on the hillside. On the bottom, there are houses of the monks. And on the top, you arrive to the center of the place with the assembly hall for the monks and the praying halls. It's also beautiful as against the steep mountain as the small houses and part of the monastery cling. It's really beautiful.
So, and you say the steep mountain. So, from the pictures I'm seeing for that one, it's on the top of a hill overlooking the valley.
Actually, it's not very much on the top of the hill, but there is a hill against which it was built. But it starts at the very bottom with the
Okay.
houses of the monks, like
Okay.
less important part of the monastery. And then it finishes on the top of that hill.
Got it. Okay. And we're probably not going to go visit all 100. So, is that a good sampling, or were there other ones that you wanted to steer us towards?
So other monasteries, some less famous monastery is the Rizong Monastery. It's to the north of Leh. You have to leave the highway. It's a bit farther inside the mountains in a gorge. This is like remote a little bit, not
Okay.
that much. I think it's a little bit less visited, but also amazing. And the monks who live there, who stay there, they follow the strictest rules in whole Ladakh. Like they can't sleep on bed, they can't really leave the monastery, they can't have any properties, they can't touch anything that was right before touched by a woman. So even the monastery order is very strict. And the surrounding. You can also walk around, hike a little bit because it's so beautiful, the road that leads to this monastery. It's one of my favorite, Rizong. Then another one, Alchi. Alchi is one of the oldest ones. It dates back to the 11th century. And Alchi is the only monastery that is not located on the mountain, on the top, but it's really flat. It's because it was built earlier when it was not necessary. There were no attacks, there was no outside threat.
Mm-hmm.
And Alchi is famous for the Kashmiri paintings. It has very old, very beautiful, colorful paintings inside. So Alchi is also special. And after that, Lamayuru is a more famous one. Lamayuru is the oldest and the largest monastery. And next to Lamayuru, you can really observe that the landscape looks like the moon, because they call Ladakh like the landscape of the moon. There are special rock formations, that's the reason. And close to Lamayuru, you see good examples of that.
Okay. And moving on from monasteries, what else are you going to recommend that we see while we're in the area? So we've got this landscape. Are there particular hikes or treks that you recommend or that you take people on?
Well, if you want to go trekking, there are several trekking options, of course, lighter and also like which takes like a week or 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not exactly familiar with that part because I do cultural trips.
That's okay.
But most of them are harder ones, more challenging. There is one small trip I know, it's a small valley, Shem Valley, which you can make like a day hiking, but you have to be careful because the altitude is very high already in Leh.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important for the people to know that when they arrive in Leh, they have to spend one day with the acclimatization.
Okay.
It's like 3,500 meter where you spend all your time after arriving in Ladakh, in Leh. So every tourist has to stay for the first day around the hotel, make only short walks, go maximum to Leh, discover the market. But it's very important to have rest. And even the rest of your trip, you will feel that,
Mm-hmm.
that you can't do as much as before, like climbing the stairs. Then you can hardly breathe. So, I mean, hiking is really, you have to be trained.
Okay. Well, and you mentioned 3,000 and some meters. So for those who are thinking a more American system, we're talking about 2 miles up, so fairly high up. And yeah, I've seen myself at 11,000 feet, and a quarter-mile nature hike becomes an ordeal. So, okay. Where to next?
We go to the Nubra Valley.
Mm-hmm.
As I quickly mentioned, but I want to go a little bit into details. It's a very popular trip, 2 nights, 3 days. When you leave Leh and you cross this over 5,000 meter high Kardung La Pass.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's not correct to say that because La already means pass, but it's common to say pass. Kardung La it gets very crowded in the summer. When you cross that, then you arrive in the Nubra Valley. There also you can visit another monastery, the Diskit Monastery. Believe me, it doesn't get boring to visit these monasteries because maybe it sounds like that, like, okay, I saw one or two, but why do I visit all of them? They have something particular. They're all different. As I said, one for the location, the other one, I don't know, like the whole structure or the atmosphere. One is small, one is big. Like, it's really not boring. Then you can spend one night at the Nubra Valley. It's better. There are tours to go there and come back the same day to Leh, but I would really recommend to stay at least one night because that's how you get the feeling of that place. And otherwise, it's very tiring and rush because in the mountain roads, you can't always progress very fast.
Sure.
Yeah, and it takes many times very long. So traveling in Ladakh, if you leave the main highway, it's actually tiring and takes time. So physically also, but it's totally worth.
Ah bon chien. Bonjour, je suis Theo, a tour leader with Explore, and this is Punti. He's helping us find truffles under the trees next to this beautiful vineyard. Maybe for tomorrow's cooking class? Oui, c'est million heure. Parfait. C'est million o'clock. Not everyone gets to enjoy a Bordeaux sunset this way, but you will if you explore. No, Punti. Search exploreworldwide.com and don't just travel. Explore.
Why are there ridges on Reese's peanut butter cups? Probably so they never slip from her hands. Could you imagine? I'd lose it. Luckily, Reese's thought about that. Wonder what else they think about. Probably chocolate and peanut butter.
When you spend one night in the Nubra Valley, after that you can go to stay there and continue to the Pangong Lake. Pangong Lake, if you check it on internet, it's beautiful blue. Very famous. Actually, Bollywood movie made it very famous. And after that, Indians started to flock there and discovered the beauty of that. So go there. You can also spend one night there. In between, also the landscape, and there are some monasteries. And after, from the Pangong Lake, you can cross another over 5,000 meter high Chengla Pass and then come back to Leh. I think that's the perfect package, like a side trip from Leh going to the Nubra Valley, and then coming back from the Pangong Lake to Leh. So it takes 3 days and 2 nights, and it's a popular package.
Okay, interesting. And so, in terms of the landscapes that people are saying, some people are looking at the photos which are in this episode, or will be by the time that this is done, and they're seeing spectacularly high mountains, snow-capped often, not a lot of greenery.
You are absolutely right. That's the specialty of Ladakh. And that's why I love it so much. These barren mountains. Greenery you can only spot down in the valleys where there is some agriculture. Ladakh is dry, extremely dry, most of the year. So there is not much vegetation, and these rock formations are beautiful there. And at the same time, very cold. Ladakh is cold, so you can't visit throughout the whole year. There is actually a small window where you can go to Ladakh. July, August are the best. It starts already from June till September, but maybe then July and August when you can be sure that it gets warm. You probably know in the mountains when the sun is strong, even if the temperature is not high, then you feel good. You can get burnt very quickly.
Sure.
But as soon as there is no sun, a little bit of shadow, it's immediately a little bit chilly. And the mornings and the evenings. So even in the middle of the summer, you have to dress up, you have to take proper things for the colder evenings. Outside this season, I wouldn't go to Ladakh.
Okay.
Because it's snow and -20, -30 degrees, like extreme. It can be extremely cold.
Okay. Yeah, that would discourage me. All right. Anything else you want to fill in the Ladakh part of the itinerary you're talking about? What else are we going to do while we're up here?
Just a little bit that our listeners could understand, like what places that I mentioned the religion that is Tibetan Buddhism. And this is where in the whole world, the most authentically practiced. And why is that? Because in Tibet, there were several restrictions to practice the religion and even the Tibetan culture. Then the Dalai Lama escaped in 1959 from Tibet, and he resides in Dharamsala in India. The religion, it's already spread in the 7th century in India. It is the most authentic. That's the specialty of that. That's the only place in the world when you can really get that feeling. And there are still monks, there are still children who are studying that. Of course, this westernization affects Ladakh too, which is a real problem. The monasteries get less support. The children don't want to be a monk. They prefer other professions. But it's still unique there. But it's also surprising that Ladakh is not only a Buddhist place. You will hear the muezzin from the mosques. It's because when the situation got more dangerous in Kashmir and the tourists didn't come, of course, that was the main source of income in Kashmir, then many Americans came over to Ladakh, to Leh. And then since then they stayed here, they settled, they do their business here. So now there are also more and more Muslims here. And there is one city in Ladakh, it's to the north, where they are the majority, the Muslims. It's the city of Kargil. That's what I wanted to make clear. And how is Ladakh? It's still majority Buddhist, but there is a city like Kargil where there are more Muslims. So it's already mixed.
Okay, got it. And Kargil is right on the border with a different province of India? What is to the north of Ladakh?
Kargil is still part of Ladakh. You may have heard in the news, there were also it was a conflict zone in 1999. But Kargil is another big city. Leh and Kargil, they are the two big cities in Ladakh. And Kargil is the place from where you can start to head to the Zanskar Valley.
Okay.
And I want to mention this Zanskar Valley in Ladakh, because you may not have time to cover that if you want to do both Ladakh and Kashmir. But if you stay in Ladakh only, then I highly recommend to go to the even more remote part of Ladakh, which is already that is Zanskar Valley. From Kargil, there is a long, long way to the valley, Zanskar, and it's also very special. If somebody wants to get real adventure, discover something where hardly any people go, like untouched, then it's the Zanskar Valley. The road is not good, I have to say. In whole Ladakh, only jeeps are going around. There are no big buses.
Okay.
But there are still good roads in Ladakh. There is like a main highway, main roads. But as soon as you head to Zanskar Valley, many times there is no concrete road. It's very slow, tiring. But at the same time, you see the highest mountains in the region, snow-capped mountains, 7,000 meter high. You see glaciers, pass by remote monasteries, and then you arrive in Zanskar Valley.
Well, and you mentioned that it's very remote. If you could fly, it's 30 miles from Leh. But if you were going to drive, it looks like it's you have to drive all the way around a range of mountains, and the road ends in the Zanskar Valley.
It's not so far from Leh.
Yeah.
As the birds fly, if there was a road. But there is no road. So you might have to make from Leh up to Kargil to the north,
right,
and then back to the Zanskar Valley, like making it like a days-long journey. I heard that they plan to connect the two with the road, which makes it much easier. But up to now, it's still a long way to go there.
Yeah, I want to say it's something like 30 miles, I said, as the crow flies, and 12 hours driving. So because you're going 288 miles and you're going 288 slow miles.
Yeah, so Zanskar is really less known. Even most tourists who go to Ladakh, they just don't visit it. There are also monasteries there. Padum is the capital, a town with there are some hotels there, so you can find it. But it's also like an untouched place.
Well, and I suspect if someone told you that they wanted you to plan a trip for them and that they wanted to get there because they listened to the podcast and they said, that sounded great, you're not going to recommend that probably for a 1-week trip in the region.
1 week not. I would not recommend, because you will cover the Nubra Valley and the monasteries around Leh in that week. And only if you have 2 weeks and you spend it in Ladakh, then you can also include Zanskar.
Okay.
And it's tiring. So it's really for those who are adventurous. There is a whole journey on the bumping roads, in the jeeps.
Well, I was thinking when you said tiring that was part of it. It's the altitude, it's the roads.
But you see a lot of interesting things.
But you personally think it's worth going?
You see the semi-nomad people of Ladakh in between. You really get to know the life, like yaks grazing around, the marmots running around. And this is the real life of Ladakh. I mean, it was recently opened to the public, and they live under these harsh conditions. It's really amazing for me. I have a friend there and who told me his story, how he grew up in Zanskar Valley. He was from Zanskar Valley, and he said till the age of 14, he never left the valley. There was no road at all that time. Then they built this road, which I'm talking about, which is still not perfect, far from that, but it opened the world a little bit. He said that they made their clothes during the winter when it's so cold. What do? They stay at home, they make some handicrafts, they take care of the animals, and they made their own clothes. He said what he was wearing was made by his parents. That's why it's a very authentic place. And not a long time ago, civilization didn't really penetrate Zanskar Valley.
Right. Well, and you mentioned that we can't do a road directly, and it's not likely that there's ever going to be a road that goes directly between Leh and the Zanskar Valley, because the mountains in between, I'm looking at the Wikipedia and it says 6,000 meters or 19,700 feet is the average height of the mountains in between. So it's kind of tall.
It's tall, but there are plans. It's possible to make tunnels, for example.
Yeah.
Everything is possible. Already that Leh is like now full of hotels. I know there are plans, but I don't think they progressed with that.
Excellent. What else do we want to talk about in Ladakh?
If you want me to talk about the food, what to eat in Ladakh.
Sure.
And also what I find important is the circumstances. So first I start with that. What a tourist has to be prepared for when going to Ladakh. Because we talk about that it's like a remote place, and it means that internet connection is very rare, for example. It's only available in Leh and Kargil, and then in the rest of Ladakh, it's very rare. So you have to
Okay.
but don't take it for granted. In between, when you go to Zanskar Valley, forget about that. And that's why it's an interesting story. The personal story, like my friend sometimes sends me an email from Leh, and then he leaves Leh and goes back to his home in Zanskar Valley, and I don't hear from him for months until he goes back to the city. So this you have to accept when you go there.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is the hot water. Like in Leh, there are good hotels, there is hot water, but even there it can happen that they set you the time frame when you can get the hot water.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
In Kargil is a big city, but yeah, maybe you have hot water, maybe not. Nothing is sure. And when you go to Zanskar Valley, it's better you think about having cold shower.
Okay.
It's part of the adventure in Ladakh.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as you leave Leh, you are out of your comfort zone. As we talk about the hotels, there is one eco resort that I would like to recommend because it's so memorable for me. It's close to the Rizong Monastery that we talked about. It stands completely alone along the Indus River. On the top of cliffs, there are small houses scattered around this resort. There is nothing else. There is no village around, only this resort. It's called Ulai Tokpo Eco Resort. It's a wonderful place. It's a good stop. These small houses like bungalows, I would say, but there are different quality bungalows, so you can get quite comfortable one. You look out of your window, you see the Indus River, you see the Rocky Mountains, and you are alone with the nature. I think it's fantastic.
Well, and we mentioned the Indus River, and this obviously is one of the major rivers in India, and one of the rivers, you're up near the headwaters of the Indus River here. Indus River also a significant thing for the world in the sense that some of the first cities in the world were founded on the Indus River, just not up here.
Yeah, exactly.
A little further downstream where it's a little warmer.
Yeah, the civilization of the Indus Valley.
Well, and you mentioned food.
Yeah, food in Ladakh, I will be honest, I mean, it's not...
You don't go for the food.
What they say is like a national food there, or most famous, is something so simple that it's called tsampa. Tsampa is like a mix of barley flour, roasted, and mixed with butter tea.
Okay.
It's like a porridge. Yeah, it's very simple. It's really a mountain food. It's good for those who are trekking because it gives energy and makes you warm. But I wouldn't say it's that delicious. I mean, as you hear the ingredients, it's very simple. But I wanted to mention, because this is the most famous in Ladakh, as they say, like something you have to try. After that, there are other things. There is a lot of meat, because if you think about the climate in the winter where it's very cold, then they have to eat very heavy food and meat. They eat every kind of meat or stews, or they also like the hot soups, but mixed with potato, mixed with meat. There is momos. Momos, you may have heard about that. Momos is like dumplings. It can be boiled and filled with different things like minced meat, spinach, cheese. Yeah, but I think the meat is the most common. So momos is also found everywhere. And if it comes to drinks, then they tell you to drink chang. Chang is a wine, a barley wine, homemade. Well, doesn't taste like wine. Also, well, I don't think it's our taste, I would say.
Okay.
Tsampa and chang, the two basic things like you hear everywhere, I think they are not the best. But locals will tell you to try.
Okay.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
Llévate más de lo que esperas todos los días con el nuevo McValue en McDonald's. Ahora puedes comprar uno y sumarle otro por $1. Así que cuando tu equipo favorito enfrente a sus rivales, enfrenta tus antojos con $5 Meal Deals. Y si estás corriendo para alcanzar el desayuno, corre a la para llevarte ofertas antes del cutoff. Tú decides, y con McValue, tu decisión siempre rinde más. Precios y participación pueden variar. BOGO $1 válido para un producto de igual o menor valor. Debe estar registrado en Rewards para ofertas en el app.
This episode is brought to you by FedEx. FedEx knows running a small business is hard enough without the hassle of shipping. That's why there's FedEx One Rate. With FedEx One Rate, you can ship your holiday packages cheaper than the post office for as low as $14.50 for small boxes. Visit FedEx.com/OneRate for details. Exclusions apply. Valid through January 19th, 2025. FedEx One Rate. 2-day retail shipping, one flat rate.
Excellent. Anything else we want to cover in Ladakh, or did you want to talk just a little bit about Kashmir?
I think we can move to Kashmir.
Okay. So you would recommend for some people that they combine a taste of Kashmir with a Ladakh itinerary?
Yes, I would.
Okay. And what is that taste that you would suggest?
So I would recommend an itinerary where you spend 1 week, 10 days in Ladakh, depending on what you include exactly from all the things we discussed. And then from Kargil, you have a night there, and then you continue to Kashmir.
Okay.
There is a big mountain dividing that, the two parts. The pass is called Zochila Pass. It's over 4,000 meters again. This is jaw-dropping and also a bit scaring, this road, which crosses the pass, because the road is very narrow and there are lorries also coming on this road.
Trucks, okay.
And the narrow cars and even sometimes 2 lorries, and then there is only the deepness. Honestly, it's a little bit scaring, this road.
And I'm not seeing quite as many guardrails along the side of the road as I might want.
You are right. There are none. There are none. So even just being alone with a private car, if I have to drive there, I'm scared to death.
Okay.
But here, I'm completely amazed. The lorry drivers, they manage everything. Afterwards, it's a wonderful experience as well, because the road and whatever you see and live is beautiful. But Zochila Pass is known to be really scaring place and roads, but no worries. The drivers are amazing in India. When you cross the Zochila Pass, then suddenly the landscape changes. Kashmir is a different place. It's green. There are pine forests, rivers. It reminds me of the Alps in Europe more. It's like Switzerland, Austria, when you see all that greenery. So there is a sudden change, and even the climate is different. Like Kashmir is a whole year destination. Of course, in winter it's colder, but you can go there. It's not like Ladakh. It's not too hot in summer because it's still at higher altitude, the Kashmir Valley and its capital, Srinagar. But it's ideal also in spring when the tulips are out. In Srinagar, there is a famous tulip garden. So it's ideal in the spring and also in autumn. So Kashmir is more like a whole year destination, and even you can go skiing if you want in winter. But if you want to combine with Ladakh and Kashmir, then of course you have to adjust the timing. So then I would still stick with July, August this season, which is good for both regions.
Okay. Yeah, I'm stunned by the photos that I'm seeing of Kashmir, and I understand why you're saying that it looks more like Switzerland than Ladakh, for instance.
Then the capital is the highlight of Kashmir.
Okay.
Srinagar is famous for its houseboats. There are hotels, but I would definitely recommend to stay in a houseboat on one of the lakes. The Dal Lake is the most famous, which goes back to the British times. The British weren't allowed to buy property or lands, so they moved to the water and they lived there. It's not the British who started that, because there was another community who already had this lifestyle, but the British used that to to move over, and they don't have to pay tax as well. The houseboats are located on the water, of course. You can approach them with the boats. These are called the shikaras. 6 persons can sit together, and then you get from the land to your houseboat. There are, I think, like 1,000 houseboat or something, like really a lot. It's a special thing because you are not in a hotel. You arrive in a houseboat and you have your own, I don't want to use this word servants, but there are people who stand by and look for your wish and they serve your meal and they ask what you want and they take care of you, like personal stuff.
Okay. Well, I hear them described as floating palaces, so that that end
Floating palaces.
and
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Very stylish. The interior carving of this houseboat, you check some photos, is amazing, like really handworks. There is a living room and there are cabins, but proper rooms, also the bed, the wooden beds, hand carved. There are different houseboats, like cheaper and also higher standard 5-star. Also, they categorize them like the 5-star and the basic ones. It's not especially expensive, but it's very stylish. It's very typical in Srinagar. You live on the houseboat, which is anchored, so it's not moving. Don't worry. And then you make your trips, you make your visits from the houseboat. You will always need a boat to live.
right.
There is a vegetable market which you can visit with the boat. There are trips. It's very famous, where you make 1 hour, 2 hours ride with these shikara boats, and they take you to places on the lake because there is a whole life on the Dal Lake. Not only the vegetable market, but there are shops, stilted houses, which work like shops. You can visit the handicraft, you can buy pashmina shawl, you get off the boat, you look around, and then when you finish, then you just hop in the boat and you continue. There are gardens, floating gardens on this lake, lotus gardens, vegetable gardens. So the lake is not only to sleep in a houseboat, but also because there is real life there. People live there and there is business, commerce. So it's a highlight of a visit to Srinagar to have a ride, boat ride.
Very interesting. I had an offer from before things got worse with the pandemic to go to India and go. They said wherever I wanted, and I was thinking of going to Rajasthan or whatever. You may have just changed my mind to go to Kashmir.
Well, Rajasthan is absolutely amazing.
Yes.
But I would really try to make people think about discovering some other parts of India, which is totally different. But it's a subcontinent, India itself. So wherever you go, it's like going to another country.
Right.
But Ladakh and Kashmir, they are really extraordinary places.
Anything else we want to talk about in Kashmir on this particular itinerary before we start to wrap things up?
In Srinagar, what else you can do apart from this boat ride? You can climb up to a Hindu temple. From there, you have a beautiful view. It's not especially the temple that is very extraordinary, but the view is very nice to the Jhelum River and the whole city. And the Mughal gardens. Srinagar and the whole Kashmir is famous for the gardens. The Mughal emperors who dominated north of India for hundreds of years, they loved Kashmir. For that, they built nice gardens. And these Mughal gardens are nowadays the highlights also of a visit to Srinagar, with flowers, with waterfalls. The locals like hanging around also nowadays. These Mughal emperors, they dominated India for hundreds of years and regarded Kashmir as their summer resort. They were really obsessed, especially one emperor, Jahangir. So thanks to their obsession with Kashmir, we can see these Mughal gardens in Srinagar.
Excellent.
And then visit the mosques in Srinagar because we are in the Kashmir Valley. 97% of the Kashmir Valley are Muslims. Of course, that's why it's a very controversial place and heavy debate between Pakistan and India, because if it's so Muslim dominated, why doesn't it belong to Pakistan? But it's another question. Just to know that it's a totally different culture, religion. We were in the Buddhist part in Ladakh and now in the Muslim part of Kashmir. I like these contrasts also during the trip. Different landscape, different religion, different food as well. So visit some mosques. There is a special Kashmiri style, roof style, which you can observe a lot of wooden structures. And also you can go to the old town, visit the market. Maybe Kashmir has a bad reputation. I don't know if you encounter this, that the people are not so nice.
I think most people don't even know that much about Kashmir to know any bad reputation.
Yeah. In other parts of India, they a little bit skeptic about them, or they say they are not so friendly. But in Ladakh, the people are absolutely friendly and welcoming and warm-hearted. In Kashmir too, you will feel good. You will feel good. They are not as friendly as the Ladakhi people still.
Okay.
I would say that. But they are happy for any tourist who goes there because they know that the reputation of Kashmir is not good. They will treat you well, but at the same time, they are more pushy in Kashmir. This I have to say. Also, when you are in the shikara and the boat ride, the sellers are coming from everywhere. You have to be a little bit strong if you don't buy anything because they will continue disturbing you. This, for example, doesn't happen in Ladakh. It's something typical of India. The sellers
Sure. Mm-hmm.
pushing.
It is.
Just to get a little bit of feeling that you don't forget you are in India.
Excellent. So I normally ask, you're standing in the prettiest spot. Where are you standing? What are you looking at? Let's do that twice. One with Ladakh and one with Kashmir. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
In Ladakh, I'm standing at the confluence of the Andes and the Zanskar River.
Okay.
To the north of Leh, the two rivers joins. I see the barren mountains. The color of the two rivers, one is darker gray, the other one is lighter gray. And it's amazing to see this V shape and the pure nature.
Okay. And in Kashmir?
In Kashmir, I go up to the Hindu temple in Srinagar and I enjoy the view of the whole city. And I see the river, the Jhelum River crossing Srinagar. I see the old town. I see the lakes with the houseboats. And I get a real overview of what Srinagar is.
Excellent. And one thing that makes you laugh and say only in northern India?
One thing that is only in northern India.
How about one thing you tell your friends that you're pretty sure they're not going to believe you?
I would tell them that I met the Dalai Lama.
Okay.
Because the Dalai Lama is visiting Ladakh and Zanskar time to time, every summer usually, or every 2 years.
Okay.
This can happen in North India that you meet the Dalai Lama.
Excellent.
And I did.
And if you had to summarize the region, the whole area in 3 words, what 3 words are you going to use? If you want, you could do 3 for Ladakh and 3 for Kashmir because they are quite different.
For Ladakh, I would use moon landscape.
Okay.
Monastery life.
Okay.
And one of the friendliest people on earth.
Okay. And then for Kashmir?
Kashmir is the region that you must discover to understand what's behind the media.
Okay. So we're going to pick behind the media as 3 words? That works.
Okay. I would use for Kashmir then life on the lake.
Okay.
Green valleys and the people's struggle to make tourists believe it's a safe place.
Okay. I can boil that down into 3 words. Our guest again has been Agnes Simigh, not from Kashmir or from Ladakh, originally from Hungary, but also from voiceofguides.com. And obviously we can go to voiceofguides.com if we are looking to get a tour with you to one of these regions. But also if we send people to your website, can they read more about either or both of these destinations? And if so, where should we send them?
Well, I recommend the 2-week itinerary, Ladakh and Kashmir.
Okay.
You can find day by day.
Excellent.
Everything planned, every useful information if you are going alone or if you book a package trip. And I would recommend also the one about the monasteries.
Okay. We'll put a link to both of those in the show notes.
I would recommend, I have an article about the Tibetan Buddhism the religion in Ladakh because it helps really understand what's around. Otherwise, it's so complex. It is a very complex topic, and to understand what you see inside the monasteries, I have an article about the religion, the Tibetan Buddhism in
Got it.
Ladakh, and it really helps to understand what you see when you enter a monastery, and also about the Ladakhi lifestyle, which is how people adapt to the weather conditions, how they get married, what happens when somebody dies, human relations.
Excellent. Well, Agnes, thanks so much for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your love for India, and particularly for northern India, for Ladakh and Kashmir.
Thank you very much for having me for this conversation. I really enjoyed, and I hope I could share some useful information and convince people that it's worth going to the north of India as well.
To realize the future America needs, we understand what's needed from us. To face each threat head on. We've earned our place in the fight for our nation's future. We are Marines. We were made for this.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
A special thanks, as always, to the patrons of the show who help support the show financially and defray some of the expenses of producing Amateur Traveler. If you're interested in also becoming a patron of the show, you can learn what that entails by going to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. I heard recently from Leanne, who wrote and said, I went to the Galapagos in August, but I chose the other evolution itinerary I booked with Quasar after you first mentioned them. As a solo traveler, all the other small boats really were out of my budget, but Quasar charges a more reasonable single supplement and had great discounts this summer, so thank you for putting them on my radar. A note about August. We did have a couple snorkel spots that were chilly but still tolerable. Many ladies doubled their shorty wetsuits, and there were 2 nights when the waters were a bit rougher, but most folks did not suffer many ill effects. Many were using the patches, though. We saw 0 whales, but those cute penguins were all over the place. The wildlife encounters here were truly unique, and hopefully I ended up with some decent photos. But the real highlight for me was learning more about the island biogeography and local conservation dynamics. Plus, there were albatross. This trip was really a dream come true. And thanks so much, Leanne. A couple things that were interesting about yours is you saw more penguins, it sounds like, than we did, and we didn't see any albatross because we were on the eastern itinerary. I think you must have been on the western itinerary for the evolution. And also special thanks because when I get letters like this, where someone has actually listened to the show and booked a trip, I obviously keep them because these help me get other trips, because I wrote back to Evolution, for instance, and sent them Leanne's letter and said at least one person has booked the trip because they heard about it on Amateur Traveler. And letters like this end up in my annual media kit as well, just basically telling people, see, people listen and take action. So always very helpful. Speaking of trips, by the time you hear this, we'll be starting to vote for where the Amateur Traveler trip will be for 2002. If you're interested in voting on that, join the Facebook group at amateurtraveler.com/trips. And with that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.